Thank you so much, Felix. Bonjour tout le monde. Good afternoon. Greetings from Pomona College in sunny Southern California. My name is April Mays. I'm a historian by training and currently serving as president of the Haitian Studies Association. It is a true honor and pleasure to share this afternoon with you, especially with our panelists, and many thanks to Felix Jean-Louis for organizing this panel and to our Haitian Studies Association team for providing the technical support and organizational resources to make sure that our webinar went through today. As many of you know, we are hosting a conference this October at the University of Pittsburgh with the theme about reparations. Please visit our website for more information about that conference. This discussion is part and parcel of our effort to bring you information about the themes that we hope to discuss fully during that conference event, and also engage you in ongoing conversations about not just reparations and its 200-year anniversary, but certainly current day Haiti, Haitian-U.S. relations. There are so many themes that touch on this topic. I also want to announce that next week, next Monday, or this coming Monday, in fact, from 2 to 4 o'clock Pacific time, or 5 to 7 Eastern, we have an online event, which is the special issue launch of the Journal of Haitian Studies, The Rights to Live Creatively. Please check your email. I will put a link in the chat in a moment so you can register and be a part of this important event, which also ties to last year's conference theme and many of you attended last year's conference around gender, sexuality, and the right to live creatively. So again, we welcome you to this afternoon's panel. Our moderator for today is Felix Jean-Louis, who is an assistant professor in the Department of History at the University of California at Irvine. He is a historian of Haiti by birth and in training. He also studies the African diaspora, Caribbean, African American, and Afro-Francophone histories. His research connects Haiti and Haitians to the larger currents of the African diaspora. He is currently working on a monograph tentatively titled Exporting the Revolution, Haitian Internationalism in the Age of Global Blackness, 1890 to 1944, that explores the role Haitian elites played in the various organizations and programs that defined the notion of the African diaspora. In it, he describes the Haitian elite males as central figures that espouse the notion that unity makes strength and urged moments across the Atlantic toward solidarity in the face of the divisions that threatened to divide the larger group. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you, April, for that introduction. Nou pa dwe, nou pa dwe. Me ta chitam, me pa voyere leo, nou pa dwe. We don't owe, we don't owe. I was sitting minding my business. I did not call you. We don't owe. That song by Bob Bovano was written, I think in 2006, but it could have well been written in 1827, 1886, 1945. Haiti since then has held a cycle of indebtedness. But before we dive into that, I want to welcome you to Revisiting the Indemnity, a discussion about the 1825 indemnity France demanded from Haiti. Before we begin, I would like to thank the people that made this event possible. First, Irene Brisson. It was a conversation with them that sparked my commitment of time to organize this event. This event would not be broadcast without the tech organization and support of Julio Perez Centeno, And a big thank you to the panelists, Alex Dupree, Chelsea Stieber, George Eddie Lucien, for your willingness to participate. Thank you to the translation team of Rose Axilien and Nadège Cher-Aubin for making our words accessible to Haiti and to our English audience. Finally, a great thank you to the Haitian Studies Association in general, and our current president, April Mays in particular, for providing, in particular for supporting the work of teaching the world about Haiti. And another great thank you goes to our co-sponsors, the Department of History at the University of California at Irvine, especially Susan Morrissey, our chair, Cynthia B., and Mark Handa. We come to speak to you during the bicentennial anniversary of the signing of the agreement for the Haitian state to repay reparations to the various members of French society for losses incurred as the result of the success of the Haitian Revolution. I do this with the demands of Haitians for restitution of these funds that are in harmony with the other calls by Haitians and other members of the African diaspora for reparations for chattel slavery. And I feel it's important to bring this up since we are talking about making up for losses. For me, the imposition is the final attempt at counter-revolution. If we take the Haitian Revolution to be the refusal of the enslaved Africans of the degradation and the violences of French plantations, and their refusal to serve as the drivers of the French economy that made Saint-Domingue the pearl of the Antilles, then the indemnity is an act of counter-revolution. It undermines the efforts of the Africans to extract themselves from the Babylon system by returning them, however informally, into its servants. Because it is the descendants of the Bossal, the Habitants, whose labor was once again exploited to the ends of international capital. It was their labor, however resistant, however contested, however negotiated, that was exploited to keep the payments coming on time. To make a further controversial statement, I find it no coincidence that the author of the indemnity, Alexandre Pétion, and the person to sign the terms presented by the French, Jean-Pierre Boyer, Pétion's protege and successor, I find it no coincidence that both had returned to Haiti along Leclerc and Rochambeau during France's last attempt to counter the Haitian Revolution. You should find it no less surprising that Boyer issued his Code Rural the following year, which included a forced labor practice known as the corvée. After 1825, empire had returned. As Jean-Marie Théodat has written, it was a weakened empire that sought to reassert itself after ceding the global domination to the British. The French agent who arrived at the head of the flotilla in Port-au-Prince Bay would later serve the French a few years later in their conquest of Algeria. Empire had doubly ensnared Haiti. First, there was the debt, then there was a loan to repay the debt, issued, of course, by the French banks. Credit Industriel Commercial established the Banque Nationale d'Haïti. For the longest time, its headquarters were in France, as a means to facilitate the repayment of the loan, its interest, and issue new loans to repay the old. There's an expression that goes, chasing good money after bad. Well, this was chasing worse money after bad. The bank emerged as a means to control Haitian finances and, by default, the seat of power. This further opened the door for empire. German bankers and merchants, the financial missionaries of what have been termed soft colonialism, used loans themselves to gain supremacy in Haiti by 1914. As war seemed imminent in Europe, the ascendant US empire looked to Haiti and its German influencers with consternation. The US had developed its own brand of economic colonialism, commonly known as dollar diplomacy, but it wasn't soft. In 1914, 3 years before they entered World War I, the US Marines landed in Haiti, took gold out of the Haitian reserves, and in the next year, they invaded again and began a 19-year occupation. But actually, it began a century of occupation. In 1915, empire had returned, and the descendants of those who fought for their freedom were now returned to the service of empire. If history is a conversation between the present and the past, where the former asks of the latter, how did we get here? Then we have to look at the indemnity as the site where international capital, empire, and empty blackness first returned to Haiti, paving the way for its full return. The American century has continued the financial domination of Haiti. Colonialism, imperialism, neoliberalism, which it seems had found its genesis in Pétion's original offer, has only ever been a financial scheme to enrich empire. To that end, dictatorship, Cold War politics, deforestation for agribusiness, exploitative labor practice to serve international companies like baseball manufacturers or the Gap today have shaped the crisis we are experiencing today. The guns fueling the gang crisis are tied to empire's reach. No, it is not the lack of funds that make Haiti today. Even if they had the money, I don't believe that that the Haitian elites would have built many more schools and infrastructure in Haiti. There is currently a billionaire in Haiti, and there still aren't enough schools or public services. The elites still avoid paying their taxes. No, empire is the cause of Haiti's issues. The empires that watched with consternation as enslaved Africans overthrew one branch of empire and worked to undermine the only truly emancipatory revolution of the age of revolution. Yo di dwe nou pa dwe. C'est blanc français yo qui dwe. They say oh, we don't owe. It's the French that owe. And with that, I want to draw your attention to another anniversary. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the founding of the Journal of Haitian Studies, the periodical of the Haitian Studies Association, the preeminent scholarly journal in the United States academia dedicated to all aspects of Haitian study. It is the site where Haitian intellectuals, activists, and social workers and their allies publish research that introduces the world to the truth about Haiti, away from the falsehoods in the media. Haitians been known about fake news. The journal has been combating fake news for 30 years. It is on the shoulders of those who have published that I stand, as do the other scholars in the HSA. We must not forget our forebearers. With that, I want to take a moment to recall my uncle, Fanfan Jean-Louis, who recently returned to Guinea and is now with those who preceded him. Our first panelist, Alex Dupree, is one of those people who laid the groundwork for the organization is one of those people who laid the groundwork for the organization to be where it is today. He is Professor Emeritus of Sociology at Wesleyan University, who has written extensively on Haiti and the Caribbean. I first met Alex many years ago, unbeknownst to him, when I read his The Prophet and the Power, which was one of the works that guided me towards where I am today. He has published widely in academic journals and appeared across several news programs. Simply, he has been a critical and thoughtful voice on Haiti. His newest book, Haiti Since 1804, Critical Perspectives on Class, Gender, and Power, published last year, offers powerful insights into the 220 plus years of Haitian history. And with that, I cede my place to Alex. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Felix, for this nice introduction and for also, along with your colleagues at HSA, for inviting me to participate in this discussion. So without further ado, I'll just read out my comments. In 1814, believing that Haiti was still divided into three parts as it had been from 1810 to 1812, France sent 3 emissaries to persuade its rulers to resubmit to French sovereignty. General André Rigaud had taken control of parts of the south in a failed revolt against President Alexandre Pétion and died in 1812. General Maximilien Bourgelat, who was allied with Rigaud, then ceded the south to Pétion, who henceforth controlled the southern and western parts of Haiti. King Henri Christophe, who ruled over the north, jailed the emissary who came to submit to French, who came to meet with him. Pétion, on the other hand, offered a quid pro quo. He would never submit to French domination, he said, but was willing to pay an indemnity to compensate the former French slave owners or their inheritors for their properties in return for France's recognition of Haiti's independence. Jean-Pierre Boyer succeeded Pétion in 1818 and reunited the whole country in 1820 after Christophe's suicide. In 1824, he sent emissaries to France to negotiate the same reciprocal agreement Pétion had proposed in 1814. France refused at first, but in 1825, King Charles X sent his own emissary to Haiti with a flotilla of 14 warships to blockade the ports of Port-au-Prince and demand the payment of an indemnity of 150 million francs in return for France's recognition of Haiti's independence. A blockade was an act of war and could have disrupted international trade with Haiti. But to be effective, it would have had to be expanded to all Haitian ports and throughout the entire island of Hispaniola that was under Boyer's control at the time. Boyer also knew that a private council King Louis XVIII convened advised him that, quote, it was time to reject all military expeditions aiming to reconquer the old French colony, because it would require the extermination of its entire population that was resolved to defend its liberty and its soil. Thomas Clarkson also wrote to Boyer in May 1821 that France had given up all idea of trying to conquer Haiti by force of arms, but that they had not given up the idea of trying to obtain it by intrigue. Nothing had changed between 1821 and 1825 when Boyer accepted the ordinance. Boyer believed the 150 million francs France demanded was excessive, but he accepted it for two reasons. Both he and his predecessor had proposed a quid pro quo of an indemnity for recognition, and no other European country was willing to recognize Haiti's independence before France. In 1838, he succeeded in reducing the indemnity to 60 million francs, but since Haiti had borrowed 30 million francs from a French bank to make the initial payments on the original 150 million francs, the total owed to France came to 90 million francs. Haiti paid off the indemnity in 1883 under President Lysius Salomon, not in the 1940s as many others have claimed. Other factors than the indemnity played a greater role in preventing Haiti from developing its economy in the 19th century. The first was the inability of successive governments since 1804 to recreate the large plantations that had made Saint-Domingue the wealthiest slave colony in the Americas in the 18th century. Doing so would have required the expropriation of the former slaves and their descendants who had gained access to land to produce crops for their own consumption and for the domestic market and export markets, and transform them into wage laborers. Boyer tried to do that with his draconian Code Rural of 1826, but failed. The second factor had to do with the conflicts among factions of the dominant classes to control the state as a means of enrichment. Between 1804 and 1915, out of 23 heads of states in 111 years, 13 were overthrown, 3 were killed in office, 6 others died in office, and only 1 completed his term. Moreover, between 1875 and 1910, Haiti incurred debts worth $166 166 million francs that were unrelated to the indemnity and were not fully repaid until 1961. The United States invaded and occupied Haiti from 1915 to 1934, and along with the policies of the international financial institutions since the 1917, destroyed Haiti's near sufficiency in food production, transformed it into a supplier of the cheapest labor for the garment assembly industries, and a net exporter of labor throughout the hemisphere, whose remittances now account for at least 25% of Haiti's gross domestic product. Today, the top 10% of the population appropriate nearly 50% of the national income, while the lowest 10% receive 0.7%. And the top 1% has 50 times more resources at its disposal than the bottom 10%. In my view, then, Haiti does not have a case for reparations. It should instead strive to create a democracy that prioritizes and serves the interests of the majority. As Amilcar Cabral said a long time ago, the struggle continues. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Alex. Up next is Chelsea Stieber. She is currently at Tulane University. She's an associate professor at Tulane University. Chelsea and I met each other, she might not remember, at the 2013 Haitian Studies Association. And she and I were at a panel on March 7th, 2020. It's forever burnt in my mind. It was the last thing I did before COVID. Since then, Chelsea has been busy. She is the author of Haiti's Paper War, Post-Independence Writing, Civil War, and the Making of the Republic, 1804 to 1954. She is the co-author with Brandon Bird of the critical translation of Louis Joseph Janvier's Haiti for the Haitians, and a translator in that article. She has published widely in Small Acts, Francospheres, French Studies, and the Haitian Historical Review, and the Journal of Haitian Studies. And if you look in the chat, April Mays has posted her recent publication about the current Pope and his ties to the island. And now I cede the position to Chelsea. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here, despite that memory, or that strange memory of the pre-COVID moment. I hope we'll all get to be together again this fall. And it is pronounced Stieber, no worries, so that's right. So I wanted to just obviously thank Haitian Studies Association and Felix for the invitation, and it's such an honor to share this space with Alex and Josh, so again, such an honor to be here. I'm sure this is going to be a rousing discussion with lots of good commentary, so I'm going to try to keep to time and not go over. But I do want to kind of just set out what I think will be my roadmap as I time myself here just for my own purposes. So first I want to look, I think we spend a lot of time when it comes to the indemnity, kind of starting at 1814 or 1825 and looking forward. But what I want to do is kind of look backward and maybe ask some questions about sort of what the conditions of possibility were for the actual idea of the indemnity. So that's point one. And second, I want to touch on the naming of Haiti. And by that, I mean the political and diplomatic meaning behind using Haiti versus France's continued use of Saint-Domingue and sort of the legal consequences of that as it relates to the indemnity. If there's time, I have a very brief third point about internal opposition to the indemnity, as well as some final remarks about indemnification and reparation as it relates to sort of a very niche library and archival kind of beef I have, but those might be too much. So I'll keep an eye on time, and maybe we can talk about those in the question and answer. So on this first point about the groundwork for the indemnity, I wanted to think about like where the idea itself came from, because it didn't just materialize out of thin air in 1825 or even in 1814. I think there are several events and practices that we can look at to kind of situate this idea. And I think it's important that we do that, to look at this wider context. So one that I've been thinking about, I'll give two, is the possibility of the 1783 Treaty of Paris and other such kind of agreements. The 1783 Treaty of Paris was between, obviously, the American colonies and Great Britain, marking the official end of the American Revolution. It formally recognized the United States as an independent nation. So already this is sounding a little familiar, but also Article 5 of that treaty provided for quote unquote restitution. That is, we might say, return, but also compensation, reparation, or recompense for all, and I'll just quote from the document itself, estates, rights, and properties which have been confiscated belonging to real British subjects. Which is to say that British subjects and loyalists who had lost their property would have it either compensated or returned. So again, just thinking about this as maybe a document that lays some groundwork. Additionally, and this is something I've only done a little bit of thinking about, but I would love for all of us to think about it more, I think we might reasonably consider the development of slave life insurance policies, which was a new and novel industry that really grew in the 18th century as a financial instrument, that this might be a way that shaped ideas of compensation, worth, value, other such measurements to this idea of indemnification more broadly for the end of slavery and, for the Haitian indemnity payment. So, again, something that hasn't been, I think, sufficiently explored and that we, as a collective group, I think can do more to think about. Oh, I actually have one or two more to add. Sorry. We might also think about the groundwork laid by British abolitionists. We know that Thomas Clarkson, in his correspondence with Henri Christophe, encouraged the Northern monarch to consider an indemnity payment to ex-colonists. That's in the Griggs and Praetor correspondence. And of course, British abolitionists were central to the negotiation of their own sort of indemnification or reparation payment with the 1833 Slavery Abolition Act in the British Empire. And of course, that was the indemnification of 20 million pounds for slave owners. So, again, these are some speculative questions, but how long had this idea been in discussion and what kinds of discussions were taking place? I'm thinking about kind of leading up to the abolition of the slave trade in the early 19th century, where there are discussions of indemnifications and conditions, even during the abolition of slavery in the 1790s in the French Empire. And similarly, were the pro-colonial lobby members talking about that in France? Were people making these arguments or using some of this language about indemnification then? Which is to say, I think there's a lot of prehistory that leads us up to 1825 or even 1824. And I won't cover, I'm very glad to have had Alex cover that 1814 moment. And I think I'll just highlight one thing, which is kind of a transition to my next point, which is that in addition to sort of Victor Malouet, who was named as the colonial minister, who to anyone in Haiti would have been clear what the position of the Restoration government was, right? He was sort of he was a planter, he was a big bad, as the youth call it. And so he really wanted to retake or attempt to retake and be the pro-colonial lobby's sort of arm. And in the language of what they wanted to do was, quote, return the insurgents of Saint-Domingue to their obligations. And so I want to think also then, I'm going to skip to my second point about this idea of the naming of Haiti. So France did not consider Haiti sovereign, of course, but so they didn't consider it Haiti at all. They considered it theirs. They considered it out of time, fixed in this moment that no longer existed. They wanted to go back to a time. I really appreciate Felix, you calling it counter-revolutionary in that sense of being able to unwind or go back. And so in this call, in the use of Saint-Domingue as a term, I think this is really important to think about. And of course, just consider the piles and piles and boxes of schemes, memoirs, military plans to retake Saint-Domingue. There is a violence in the non-recognition and non-sovereignty, of course, but there's a violence in the refusal to name Haiti. But it's not just in these sort of wild schemes that the pro-colonial lobby is putting together to pressure the French government to stage an expedition or to get some sort of indemnity payment if they are unable to. There were these real legal and political implications as Haiti and France continued to interact despite this non-recognition. And so I wanted to give one example of this that sort of precedes all of this language of Saint-Domingue and of the, oh, and I'm going to be slowing down a little bit because typical of me, I'm speaking a little bit too quickly. I wanted to talk about one instance of this in an article that I published in the Revue d'Histoire Haitienne in 2022. In short, there was a scandal involving a case between a Russian ship captain and a French merchant who had paid the captain to sail him to Haiti in December 1815. These two men had a dispute. The French merchant wanted to pay the ship captain in copper coin, the local currency, and the ship captain had stipulated gold and silver. They went to court in Port-au-Prince, where the court there ruled that the Russian captain had to accept the local currency, so in favor of the Frenchman. Once back in France, though, the Russian ship captain hired a lawyer to argue his case before the royal court in Bordeaux and invalidate the ruling of the Haitian court. The language of the court documents and of the plaidoyer of this Russian ship captain and his lawyers is stark in its racism, even for the period. The ship captain's lawyer argued that he was never going to find reason or equality in a place like Haiti, dominated as it was by, quote, men descended from Africa. And I'll just quote actually from the document itself because it's so stark. Surrounded by Africans, frightened by the memories attached to each tree, each stone of this land still red with blood and fire, he knew that it was not there that he would find reason and fairness. But he reassured himself by thinking, he declared that on his return to France, where he would find judges whose souls would be as white as his face, he would ask for and obtain protection and justice. So again, this is sort of the language about thinking about what Saint-Domingue, Haiti is in 1815 and 1817 in France. What do you think the French court decided? They sided with the Russian ship captain. The French court treated Haiti and its court and its judgment as illegitimate, le prétendu tribunal de Port-au-Prince, the so-called, and also in revolt against the legitimate authority of France. The French court invalidated the Port-au-Prince court's decisions, and I'll quote again, considering that the rebels of Saint-Domingue have usurped a government that is not recognized by any power, they are in revolt against the legitimate authority of the King of France, of whom they are subjects, which excludes any notion of judiciary power, legitimacy, or legitimately exercised in the name of the so-called le prétendu Republic of Haiti. So again, I want to look at my time, okay. I want to think about this language of negotiation for the indemnity because it becomes so much clearer what France refuses to do, which is to call Haiti, Haiti. And I think if we look through all of the documentation and correspondence about the negotiations, it's so obvious, these French uses of Saint-Domingue, because the agreement and the problem of what happens when they continue after. Because the agreement was supposed to guarantee recognition, but also the right to be called by the name that they had chosen and chosen well. So there's a lot of insistence kind of on, you must call us Haiti, don't call us Saint-Domingue. And I think anyone who is sort of familiar with the French continued sort of slip-ups of calling Haiti Saint-Domingue, there's like a real deep history in the law, right? 1825 is the law. So I think I have a few more minutes and I'm just going to throw out these other thoughts that I wanted to put out here and then we'll be able to move on. So one was this idea of internal opposition to the indemnity. I think there's this idea or you know, maybe we don't think about it enough or see it enough because Boyer is so sort of ever present. But there was, before 1825 and after, a really loud group who's sort of a constellation of a lot of different figures and different sort of lineages in Haiti that were absolutely against not only the indemnity, but about sort of this idea of, and I'll quote it and then I'll give you the French, handing the country over to the French, or handing the country over to the whites, the foreigners, which is livrer le pays aux blancs. This was a common refrain during the civil war between Henri Christophe and Alexandre Pétion. Of course, Christophe was accusing Pétion and people who were French curious or sort of interested in a kind of republicanism that was linked to French universal republicanism, that they were in fact going to hand the country over to the French. And so there's this opposition that we see of people who saw and who understood what that danger was and called it that from the beginning. And so finally, one point I want to make, and it's again niche, but it's one I hope you will permit me to make, which is just thinking about reparations and about indemnification as it relates to a very narrow but very academic thing, which is all of the archival and print material about Haiti and from Haiti. It's come up actually more and more, and I think it's worth talking about here too. I suppose it maybe is naive on my part, but I had never done a lot of thinking about where all of these amazing print documents from Christophe's kingdom, came from, or why they're in all of these amazing research libraries in the US. I just recently had an experience with this at a collection in New Orleans, where I suppose I didn't know that these were mostly being purchased from private collectors in France or at auction. And so there's just such an amazing and a kind of an insidious thing about thinking about the amount of money that gets spent by these institutions to private collectors and to auction for Haitian materials that go into other, more accessible, but nevertheless, libraries and collections, and none of that goes to Haiti at all. And so I think there's a way where we should be talking more about that. It's not all doom and gloom, though, and so this is the point I will end on, which is that other people are thinking about ways to do this differently. Julia Gaffield, Marlene Dowd, along with several other institutions, were able to repatriate manuscript transcripts of Toussaint Louverture's autopsy report, which had come up for auction in France, or actually in the US rather, in a New York auction house. They sprang into action, marshaled resources, got a grant, and purchased the documents to repatriate them to Haiti. And so again, just in terms of thinking about things that are maybe more academically focused and what we might do as an action item, I wanted to offer that as a closing thought. Thank you so much. I really look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, and it is my pleasure. I have not met in person Georges-Eddy Lucien, but I have been an admirer from afar. He is a history and geography professor at the State University of Haiti. He is a director of the Dynamic Laboratory of American Worlds, LADMA, for the École Normale Supérieure. He is the head of the master's degree in geography at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, and a member of the coordination of the history department in the University of Haiti. He's an author of several works, most widely known for sorry, I'm skipping around. He is, Une modernisation manquée, Port-au-Prince, 1915 to 1956, Volume 1, Modernization and Centralisation, published by the Université d'État Haiti in 2013, for which he received a distinction from the Haitian Studies Association, and Une modernisation manquée, Port-au-Prince, 1915 to 1956, Volume 2, Centralisation et Dysfonction, also produced by the Université d'État Haiti. Excusez-moi, c'est pas long. He is currently a visiting scholar in the Department of Geography, Environment, and Geomatics in the Faculty of Arts at the University of Ottawa. And with that, I welcome you, José-Eddy Lucien. Vin parler, vin by.
Good afternoon. The presentation that I will have is concerning the ordinance, and I will show in this ordinance that it allows that there would be some sort of contradiction, like internally in Haiti, and also an a contradiction in terms of France. And here I would show that in the code of the roll call in 1825, it was a counter-revolutionary, and I would just actually link this between 1825 and 1806. So I would show that first, the revolution of the 1804, it brought with it a lot of contradiction. And to resolve this contradiction, that which will bring the coup d'etat in 1806. And this coup d'etat is going to bring a lot of other contradiction. And also, it's going to open up this sort of avenue, a large avenue, that will allow there would be negotiation of the 1825. And then I would look at how in 2005, and I'm going to look at the challenges that it has. First, I would say there is a link between the ordinance of 1825 and the 2006 coup d'etat. In this revolution of 1804, it really brought a lot of contradiction along with it. And the element, the principle, the central element that would bring this contradiction is the land. Whereas the Boyer and Njena, Pétion, these were the freed people, and they live in terms of because they were the kids, the children of the colonizers, therefore they inherited the land. And so there were many lead that were actually placed, like Henri Christophe and others. They thought that they were legitimate to be able to do land grabbing practices. And so this is what Dessalines is going to now, is going to say, like, parents that are in Africa, for example, the mass of the slaves, the mass agricultors, do they not have rights to a piece of land? So this is the contradiction that's going to explain this coup d'etat of 2006. It doesn't mean that there's not two elements, but it's the main contradiction. Then when the coup d'etat happened, there's going to be this sort of a group of measures that would allow that those people are the ones who are land grabbers. There's going to be the 1807 of 9th of February is going to be where there's going to be this law that says that anyone who actually lost land, they can actually go through a process of reclaiming their land. And there's going to be other laws that's going to bring these projects of proprietors. In January 21st of 1807, there's going to be, the Senate is going to have a law where it's going to say that people cannot receive less than 10 acres of land. In other words, this is a decision that's going to be in favor of the large proprietors, the landowners. This is going to be now the smaller or the mass agricultors that's going to go against them who are looking for land. So altogether, these decisions are going to create these new contradictions. First, there's going to be contradiction between the new freed people and the old freed load. Like there is going to be between Henri Christophe and Pétion. There's going to be Henri Christophe and Boyer when Christophe died, and then there's going to be others like between Boyer and Pétion. So you have like old freed people and new freed people. This contradiction was there way before the periods, way before 1804. We must remember this civil war of the South in 1799 to 1800. And this is going to bring two groups against each other. So in this fight between the old and the new freed, in 1820, there's going to be the death of Henri Christophe, and where there's going to be Goma in another part. In 1820, this time is going to change the situation. On one hand, the alliance of those that were leaders that were basically new freed, old freed, and then the newer figures, for example, of Henri Christophe and others, you're going to have these elites that are going to be leaders that are having some elements of older freed. And so it's not only just older lead, there's going to be new and older leads. It's not going to be just, now there's going to be a color issue. Because in the north, you have either dark-skinned or mulattoes that were not necessarily integrated in this elite groups. So that this is like in 1820s sort of issue that was happening. In 1820, there's going to be this thing that's going to happen where there's going to be another representation of the country where the political power is going to be really founded and based in Port-au-Prince. And don't forget that in 1804 to 1820, Port-au-Prince was never going to be going to have this pole where all of the powers will be concentrated. On the north, you have Henri Christophe. In the south, and at one point, you had Rigaud. In the Grand Anse region, you would have Gaumont. So 1820 would allow this possibility that if France would negotiate, there's only one interlocutor. Whereas before 1820, they had to negotiate where maybe they might send two emissaries that would have maybe one or two people and that would go to the south and the west. And then another one would go to Au Cap or in the north. So 1820, there's going to be where there's one interlocutor. The other important element is the death of Gaumont, because Gaumont, this was another project. Gaumont, and also, although he was close to Henri Christophe since 1807, 1820, but he was not in the grand proprietary society. So he had this satisfaction, this local satisfaction to work in community. And so this non-recognition was not a problem for Goma. It was those that were in having the raw materials, the exportation, they had this contradiction with the non-recognition. So with Goma, not only that they had a project with like based on the larger proprietaries or landowners, it's going to bring some other project that is not included in their project, because every so often they're going to have, Pétion would have to actually ask the agricultors to go towards Goma, but they have to distribute the land. Even if it was maybe a letter that Pétion would have to go to send based on trying to pushing the land, to give the land to the to the agricultors, and then they're going to be not only is going to be a political, like a voluntary political, but it's because they're going to have this political movement to break the movement that Gomen was pushing. And we can see how maybe when Christophe created this nobility, Pétion had a declaration that Pétion is giving title, but I'm giving land. And he wanted to see who is going to attract more people. So 1820 allowed not only this sort of Pacific of Gondance, the region Gondance, and to think about that Goma is no longer there, Henri Christophe is no longer there, and in Port-au-Prince they were actually doing land grabbing practices, and that period is going to also bring another contradiction, because when you have a lot of land, there are two contradictions within this period. if you have a lot of
et
land and then you're going to have these raw materials for exportation, you're going to have issues with the market, and this non-recognition is going to limit your market share. And even though you have market, when they don't recognize you, the country that's going to buy these products is going to have, you're going to have to lower the value of your products. And so Pétion had to lower the tariffs so that they can face with Great Britain. When you have a lot of land, you're going to have a workforce issue. You're going to have a labor issue. And this labor issue is going to bring a lot of problem. The problem is going to be where Gaumont, for example, when you have to give land, if the agricultures would have land, they're not going to work for you. So this fight for the little agricultures, it's in contradiction with the way that the larger landowners would be functioning. When Gaumont died, Boyer now becomes the person who's going to pacify this Grenache region. Now he has this opportunity to have more initiative to break the process of the smaller land agricultures. And so Boyer now is going to have to take a lot of different measures, allowing so that they can block the process of the smaller landowners. And they did some different laws so that they can stop that, except for the law Thibonite in the north. And then when Christophe died, and they know at any moment in the north, there might be some sort of reaction, manifestation against them, revolt against them. And so they're going to try to have land grabbing, but then it's not on all the territories. In this sense, I would say 1825, it not only going to resolve the contradiction for France, because now it is in the phase of mercantilism, where it's going to be able to produce more and it needs more market. And don't forget, in these periods of 1825, the entire island, it was under the control of Boyer. And so Haiti was not just only in the west, but it was in the west and the east. And so all this connection with France, we think of this independence as becoming a spatial obstacle to stop the product of the French to become in a larger quantity. And at the same time, it is an obstacle in terms of circulation of the capital of the French, And in fact, in 1825, in 1821, there was a French official who wrote that today we cannot be thinking about how we're going to go to Haiti and reclaim it as a colony, because in the development phase that we are, Castel said that at this amount of this level of economic prosper, we can actually make it a more prosperous economy, agricultural economy. We're going to have the consul that's going to defend our interest. And so they were already considering the independence as an obstacle so that they can for their products, and also the obstacle for their capitals, because don't forget that we are in this phase of this industrial capitalism, and in this phase the banks play a larger role, and there's still going to be now the bankers in the French political system, because the state of France now becomes this sort of like a broker that's looking for the opportunity for the bankers that are starting to have capital, that are productive. In fact, the Minister of Finance in this period in France, the opposition was criticizing this minister to say that all the decisions are being done in the favor of the bankers, of the French bankers. And so, in other words, we would say that the question the question of this ordinance, this is an attempt to resolve within this contradiction, this internal contradiction and the internal contradiction, internal and external contradiction. And the other thing that it would say is that in 1825, it is also going to bring the country into this neo-colonialism period, and it's going to jeopardize the peasants, the mass of the peasants, because don't forget that the cost of coffee was decreasing, and the fund of the coffee was used to pay the indemnization. And so those are the mass of the peasants that are going to actually work hard to pay this indemnization. So 1825 has a huge representation, because to say, as the author Marcelin said, he said, those gentlemen were always going to negotiate, because they're not going to go back knowing that they already have this privilege that they have within the country since the death of Dessalines. And in this sense, when we're talking about 1825, there's different representation, there's different gaze. There are people who talk about the indemnization. When they talk about the indemnization, they agree that Haiti had a transaction. It's one sense. And some people talk about ransom, which in this ransom, there's also this trap, because when you talk about ransom, as if there was this huge country like France that imposed itself, and the other person did not have an possibility. Now it could be like a class sort of position, because the material conditions could bring those people to accept the 1825 also. This is why there's different gaze, because when we talk about the definition of ransom, it could be maybe a group of people who would actually working, and when they were working since Africa, when they took them from Africa, they come across, and then they're still fighting, and then they were able to take with their blood their independence in 1803, and France imposed them this money to give. This is what we call the ransom. And there's lots of different representation. There are a lot of people who are talking about 1825 in terms of the ransom, but they don't necessarily have the same representation. This is why Marc Etienne said we're not on the same field. We cannot see everything the same way. In 1825, when that resolution was signed, there was a lot of parties within Port-au-Prince at some folks' homes. Then the people of the mass, they were never able to accept the 1825 ordinance. And let me tell you, this is what the mass was singing when they were going to the port. They would say, French whites are asking for money. What are we going to get it? We're going to shoot them. And so there were two different kind of representation. The interpreter didn't catch the song. Apologies. And we are in different pages. We cannot see the ransom the same way.
Merci en pile, Georges. Thank you for everybody for listening to our three wonderful speakers. I am going to I have some questions for the speakers, and that'll give us some time to let some questions pour in. I'm going to give you all the questions. I'm going to go Alex, Chelsea, and then George, and then I will go back to Alex so he can speak. So Alex, in your wonderful talk, you talked about a sort of a historical perspective that says that the debt was paid much sooner than people have generally acknowledged. Can you talk about where this comes from, what the sources are, give a reflection on that, and what do you think is the disconnect that have people thinking about it as a longer term debt? Chelsea, again, great talk. I appreciated thinking about it. I'm actually teaching a course on early US history now. I have a lot of my students in the class. So you taught me something today about the indemnity that Britain wanted to impose on the Americans. So I have two questions. Can you say a little bit more about the indemnity? Was the Americans, did the Americans pay it? But secondly, and what I'm really more interested in is, can you talk more about the internal opposition? I know you do a lot of that in maybe the third chapter of your book, second chapter. But we want to know, and I would like to know particularly, who were these people opposing it in your book? Where were they from, and where do they fit in this trajectory that you gave? Georges, pour même, demander quelques
As
questions.
first, Josh, can you
Est-ce qu'on
please
peut
talk more
parler
about
plus
the
sur
the
paysan yo,
peasants or the
jan yo
farmers?
dénoncé
I like the music.
l'ensemble là.
It
Et bon,
it
ti musique là,
looks like the music
semblait
of
musique
Bob
Bobano a,
Bovano. I
un
think
peu
they're talking
li
about the
semblait
same
c'est même
story,
histoire, y a
and I
parlé de
would
même
like
histoire, yo sous même
to
beat là. Et
a
mais ta
call
remè
for
aussi parler de
restitution that the
appel ou
Haitians are
restitution
launching,
qui a
why they launching
Haïtien yo
it,
a
and
lancé,
what are their
qui sa
views
yo
on it, how do they
lancé,
see
qui
it,
jan yo
and
wel,
what is their perspective. And Alex,
sa yo
m'a
wel la
continuer
dan,
avec vous.
comme ça. So Alex, I'll come back to you. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. And for all of those people who forgotten, when and George is speaking in Creole, as is the language of Haiti. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a little globe that says interpretation. So if you really want to understand what he's saying, please click on that, because it's very insightful, as are all the panelists. So Alex, you can go ahead.
I'm not exactly sure what you were asking. If you're suggesting when the indemnity was finally paid.
Well, you in your talk, you said that the indemnity was paid under Solomon,
Correct. And it
unlike
was this.
what is generally held and what people have said otherwise. Can you talk about the historical argument that says that the indemnity was paid in 1948 versus what you've said, and what leads you to say that it was paid under Solomon?
Well, the reason I'm saying it was paid under Solomon, because this is what the documentation shows, both in the archives in Haiti and elsewhere, but also other historians like Thomas Madieu and Beauvoir Audouin and so on. They have all had documented that it was under Salomon that the indemnity was paid. Now, there were subsequent debts that were accrued by presidents after Boyer, and that were not part of the indemnity, but that were accrued beyond that were repaid later. So the Boyer paid under Salomon. The indemnity was fully paid under the regime of by President Salomon. He himself declared that we have finally paid the debt. Since then, other governments that came after accrued a series of debts that were not related to the indemnity, but that were finally paid in the 1940s. So that's why I'm making the distinction between the indemnity debt and post-indemnity debts that were not related to it.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Chelsea?
And so anybody who wants to see the documentation you can go to Beauvoir Audouin, you can go to Thomas Madieu, you can look at my own bibliography, my own references, and you can decide what you want at that point.
Yeah, and Alex has a published piece that he spoke at the University of Miami, in which I think these footnotes are in that document as well.
Some of them, but the more complete footnotes would be in my book. So
yeah, this is a great insight. It's changed what I knew about Haiti when I read it.
okay.
Yeah, thank you. Chelsea, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the question. So on to my point about the 1783 treaty. I mean, it's not the same as an indemnity in the Haitian sense. I'm looking for the idea of it, right? Where do we have ideas about the need to repay or repair based on, post-warfare and for recognition? And so really what it is an agreement that the US will, essentially provide essentially, or rather, British subjects and loyalists who lost their property were owed or needed to be compensated, and that was just part of what they'd negotiated. So again, that's sort of the sense, one possible sort of legal instrument to think about what, and again, this is me, I've been doing a little bit of researching. I think we're all kind of thinking about new ways to approach the indemnity with this anniversary, trying to think of ways to put it in a longer context and think about where the myriad places it came from sort of 18th century and early 19th century statecraft. So that was my thought. So I hope that answers that. I think it's an interesting, potential connect. I actually think the question of insurance is maybe even more interesting, especially as that relates to sort of the new financial sector. And that, I can't find anything on. So again, I sort of would like to think about this with other interested people. As to the internal opposition, and this actually links up with what Alex was saying, it's mostly quoted in Madieu. So he's sort of, his chapters and really the volume that covers the indemnity is really essential to that. And it's in the newspapers as well from the period, where you'll see, writing in critique and in opposition. There's even a really fascinating article that he reproduces from the eastern side of the island, where people there are questioning whether with the indemnification, is this, independence as such? Those are some of the sort of places where we're seeing it. In my book, am linking it to a longer tradition of Christophian or Christophist, as I call it, opposition that's primarily in the north, and that's you see kind of continuing to come back. Also, and then there's so much that's written opposition. That's opposition that comes out in print. There is surely and clearly opposition among the people and among the so-called cultivateurs, the habitants, right? But that is not something that I trace because it's not written.
Thank you for that, Chelsea. And for those who haven't read it, I greatly enjoyed Chelsea's book. Georges, est-ce que vous pouvez répondre à une question, s'il te
Can you
plaît?
please answer your question, George? Just like Alex introduced it earlier, the money was paid in 1883. However, Haiti continued to pay interest, which was linked to the initial debt, because the debt kept moving from one bank to another. With regards to restitution, you had asked me, you said what explains why Haitians, they have certain arguments, the people who are interested with restitution, because it was an injustice, I could say a historical injustice, that they had imposed a country that struggled for his independence and got ransomed. And the treaty, the April 17th, it wasn't a treaty between two countries according to the law. It was an ordinance. And an ordinance, what does it mean for a country? It's the whole decision that a king had taken on the territory that he has control over. In theory, the decision that was taking place had nothing to do with the independence of the country. It was an attempt to completely eradicate the symbolism of 1804. And in that sense, it was a complete injustice. And then it's with regards to this injustice that certain struggle is being has launched since in 2003 with the government of Aristide, that organization inside the country or outside the country that continue with this effort so that France can pay that money back. And you can see the declaration or the statement that the government had made in April 17th. It's not different from the ordinance. The ordinance from 1825, Charles X decided it, and the Haitian people just embraced it. The decision of April 17, 2025 is the same. The President Macron spoke, and then the people from Haiti just embraced it, and they published a decree and supported it. When we talk about restitution, we talk about the organization or the main figures to understand France. When you said you are creating commission and then you calling historians, one of the effort that historians are doing is establish the truth. And then when you're trying to establish truth, it's when there are doubts. For now, the research that Haitians have done on the subject matter, there's no doubt they might have some discussions about the amount or when the date that was completely paid for. They might have a debate surrounding that, and then these can be clarified very quickly. There are certain things that have not been completed. Oh no, of course.
I think we lost Eddie. Okay. Well, we'll wait for him to come back. It was getting hot.
I actually have a question before, just a thought. Just because Nadej is here and Eddie, Georges had mentioned this. Nadej and I translated Franck Etienne's Voix Marassa, the section where he talks about that poem. Could I share it in the chat?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay.
That's great. Thank you. While Chelsea does that, I had the Q&A open. I had to close it. I'm going to read the question. There's a question in Creole. I'll read it out loud, and I'll translate it in English after that. Merci pour présentation yo, nou yo. Mwen ta remen konen sin pa ta ka liye peyi det indépendance la ak tip dirijon peryode la ki te plis influense ou atire par modèle l'État kolonial yo et tiré de la France. Nan yo sens, eske l'indépendance te paret gen même valeur nan jan diferent dirijan ki koumanse dirijan nasyon wa? And I take that to mean, I think the person is asking for, is there a link between the payment of the debt of the independence to the leaders who ran at the period? And I think some of us have touched on this in the conversation. Is it why they were attracted to the colonial state model inherited from France? And in the question, in this sense, did independence seem to have the same value in the eyes of different leaders who began to lead the question? I don't know, Alex, did you want to start with that? And then Chelsea?
Well, I think one where I very much agree with AG is look, the issue of the indemnity by both Pétion and Boyer was to protect and promote the interests of the newly emergent property-owning class in Haiti. The issue here is that as long as Haiti was not recognized as an independent country, and as long as the issue of the debt hang over the Haitian leaders, the property question would never have been resolved. And by property question, I mean not just the property of Haiti in general, but the newly dominant large property owning class that was emerging after the revolution, that both Boyer and Pétion had an interest in protecting those properties from the possibility that the former French property owners and their inheritance, the people who inherited those properties would have a claim on those properties because they still held the titles to those properties. So once France accepted the indemnity, that question went away. They no longer had any claims. The former French planters, the former French property owners no longer had any claims on the properties that now belong to Haiti, and that Boyer and Pétion and subsequent administrations were redistributing to create a class of property owning Haitians. So we cannot understand the question of the indemnity. We cannot de-link the question of the indemnity from the question of the interests of the newly emergent property owning class, not the peasants, not the small peasants who didn't have access to land or who owned land without titles, but the new class that needed the titles to take control and own and pass on those properties to their children and grandchildren and so on. So there was a fundamental class issue in the decision by both Pétion and Boyer to pay the indemnity to France, so that the former French property owners no longer had any claims on Haitian property. That's what the indemnity was meant to resolve.
Thank you, Alex. Et Georges dit, si vous regardez, si vous êtes en bas le Q&A, il y a une question Charlie, Camille, Victor te écrit.
I will allow Chelsea to answer the question, but if you'd like to continue what you were saying, you can go ahead after that.
Parole là, tu as fait ou qu'a fait l'appel Chelsea fini, OK? D'accord.
Okay.
Chelsea, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to Alex. Again, my which I think is really astute. I don't, I'm thinking more of sort of both the cultural, but also the sort of Republican model, if we want to call it that. I want to refer to the question again. We're talking about the colonial state model inherited from France. And so, and again, the value of independence in the sense that Alex is talking about it, and being able to sort of ensure a class that was not able to emerge well, I mean, it was, right? It is a question of, under duress, I suppose, or contested. So I think, yeah, no, I think that's, I think I just would want to insist on, again, on what I talk about in my book, which is that there's a different idea of what the state is in the Civil War in early independent Haiti, right? Pétion is created a republic. Boyer continues that republic. Dessalines created a state that did not want to be Republican, for reasons that might be interesting to think about along this question of the sort of landed, sort of liberal Republican class that Alex is talking about wanting to sort of establish itself. And Christophe created a landed, or not a nobility and a monarchy. So in that sense, there's an interesting tension, because this is a monarchy in France that is, coming back to Haiti for these negotiations. And at this point, it is Boyer's sort of island-wide republic. And so I think that's an additional, sort of interesting factor to think about the way that this is being negotiated out. And Haiti is doing it from the position of sort of the remaining republic, one of an abolitionist republic in the Atlantic against France, now monarchy returned. And they sort of use that, I think, in their identity in those negotiations.
Yeah, thank you. Georges, je m'attendais, oui.
Georges, please, you can intervene. Yes, sorry. There seems to have been a little technical problem. That's why I was disconnected, sorry. So in terms of the restitution, I was saying how we were looking at the ordinance, which is in this time, in this period, in terms of this is a decision when we talk about the monarchy. This is an ordinance that was not considering Haiti as a country that was independent. And, in addition to that, it was sort of, it was actually trying to undermine the 1804 symbol, the symbolism of 1804, because it had a lot of value in terms of maybe whether it was the Polish, the German, the fact that they were there. There were a lot of values that were inclusive. They would give them land when they come, for example, even Afro-American, they would get land too. And this was something that was helping countries that are fighting for independence. This ordinance, that is what it broke. It the restitution, in a sense, was this injustice, we would say, in historical injustice, which would mean that a country that actually fought for its 1804 independence, and then they asked them to pay. We cannot really have this sort of this transactional sort of report about it, because we would say that there's this class, this new class that was actually developing, that was being appropriated, because the 1825 sort of contradiction that was contesting, this is like this elite that was leading. This is the elite that actually was creating this condition so that they can have more property, more land. Because they had more land, it becomes a contradiction with the question of non-recognition of the independence, because this limited the market for them. But at the same time, it has another issue in terms of the internal fight that was happening with the gourmand and the agricultors. Now you have like the larger proprietor agricultures. Uh, Even though now the ordinance of 1825 was not really resolving the issue for the recognition, but for the land, it was probably working there. There was a lot of laws in terms of the the expression of corvée, and this is something where Henri Christophe was facing a lot of other issues. There's a lot since 1804. Remember, in 1822, there was a lot of in the East and the West that was actually they had um, they were fighting in terms of the laws that Boyer uh, decreed. These are laws so that the agricultors can actually have access to land. This is like a reflection of class. This is why when you look at the question of the ordinance, we also should look at there's this social group that because of their materialist sort of condition, it really made it in a way where people would have to work hard. In the period that we're discussing right now, we cannot have this approach of this in terms of um, transactional finance. And we have to look at this sort of contradiction where there are people who could establish a lot of realities on these questions when they're surely bringing these issues. It's not a question of state and state. Even within the France, those who are going to benefit from the ordinance of 1825, it's going to be the landowners and then the bankers, even the colonizers. They would actually they would have some contentious practices as well. So when we're talking about restitution in 2025, I go back to what Francois says, we're not on the same page. We cannot have all the same views. And when we're actually doing all these movement to ask for restitution, we have to think about like there was this social class that was supporting them. And it's not just that explain the situation of the country. There is this bourgeoisie, this elite in the country that are coming from 2000, that's going to reinforce all of these from 1825. That's actually this elite, this bourgeoisie is actually grabbing, that are actually from since then they're actually going to being supported within these laws that are created in the country up to today. I would say that I completely agree.
D'accord. And I think on that note, Alex, Claudine Michel writes in the question, and Claudine Michel, another founding member of HSA and the Journal of Haitian Studies, she asked a question for you, Alex. Can you explain your rationale behind your thought that Haiti does not have a case for reparation?
Sure. Because the issue, as has been discussed before, is that it was Haiti that proposed to pay France an indemnity. It did so because of the question of property, as has been raised before. Who was going to own the former colonial properties that the French left behind? So there was a newly emerging property owning class that Pétion and Boyer and so on were promoting. But for that to happen, they had to ensure that the former French planters no longer had claims on the properties that the newly emergent Haitian class was appropriating. And so both Pétion and Boyer had the interests of that emergent class in mind when they offered to pay the indemnity. So in that sense, it was a class interest that was being defended by Pétion and Boyer, not the interest of the general population. And so in that case, Haiti put the offer of the question of the indemnity on the table. France was not interested in indemnity until Haiti raised it. France wanted to reconquer Haiti. Boyer and Pétion and Boyer were defending the interests of the Haitian bourgeoisie, the emerging Haitian bourgeoisie. So it's in that context that I'm arguing that Haiti does not have a claim to reparations.
So can I ask a provocative question on this issue? I kind of alluded to it in my introduction, but were Pétion and Boyer protecting, like you said, their class interests, but the class interests perhaps of their fathers? Is this have to do, and I think it's tied to the early
Sure.
question about who the leaders of the heads of state were?
Of course. They were protecting the interests of the colonial property owners that they were inheriting, and they wanted to recreate a new property owning class in Haiti. But for that to happen, they had to also make sure that the former French property owners no longer had any claims on those properties. And so the indemnity was meant to indemnify the former French colonial property owners. That's what the whole thing was about.
Okay. Here, Marie Nadine, and your name gets cut off, is asking a question about, can somebody talk about, maybe Chelsea, as you kind of connected it to the American Revolution, that the US paid France millions of dollars for the help that they provided during the American Revolution? Oh, somebody just typed and threw off my thing. Sorry, I have to find it again. And so she asked, yeah, can you just talk about that if you have any information about that? And she ends with, so far as I know, this was probably the first instance of gunboat diplomacy in the region. Do you have anything to add on that, Chelsea? Or Alex, or anybody?
I mean, you're the one, Felix, teaching the class on the U.S. history. Maybe you have something to add.
I don't. That's why I was hoping that you may have had something.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about the Haitians who fought in the Siege of Savannah. I mean, that's something that we can potentially connect to it. Could I actually just ask Alex a follow-up question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I mean, I understand the foundation of your argument and how you've constructed it. On the one hand, like, isn't 1804 the sort of argument and the legitimacy of whatever properties? You know, of course there's contestation, right? Of course there are claims, but like 1804 is the establishment of independence and that the legality from their standpoint, that is the Haitian revolutionaries and the first heads of state of that land. And so, you know, I just, it sticks with me like it's, to what degree does whatever claims the French were making matter? I understand that the lack of recognition created an impossible situation or close, right, in terms of trade and in terms of, you know, what was possible. Although I guess I just like thinking of either sort of other speculative possibilities or counterfactuals to kind of think about what else might have been possible. It just strikes me as a lot to hang everything on the, you know, supposed, or we'll just use the word, the prétendu claims of people who had, you know, who no longer had those claims because Haiti legally proclaimed independence.
I'm not sure what you're asking. Of course, the French property owners didn't give up their titles. That's what the indemnity was meant to do. Once the indemnity was accepted by France, the French property owners no longer had any claims on Haiti because the indemnity was meant to indemnify them.
I guess I'm asking the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to clarify your question by saying, like, what is the gravitas of those claims? You know, like, what is the reality? And in that in the piece at University of Miami that you published, I think you argue that the Haitian state was not worried about France coming back to recolonize them as well, right? So
Well,
if they're
France,
making the
France at the time was, you know, there was a commission that for what the king, whatever, I forget his name, which king it was at the time after 1825, but it was clear that the French were not contemplating the recolonization of Haiti. What they wanted was to indemnify the former property owners, and that's what the indemnity was meant to do. Because who knows, for example, if you look at what's going on to a different case, where the former property owners in Cuba are now asking for compensation for the properties that the Cuban government took over. Okay. In the case of Haiti, the Haitian government now controlled Haiti, but it didn't have the titles of the properties that the former French planters had remain in France. So from the standpoint of Pétion and Boyer, there was no guarantee that those former property owners could not come back and claim the properties that the new Haitian property owning class was taking over. So in my view, the indemnity was meant to put that issue to rest, and once it was paid, they no longer had any claims on Haiti. So if that's the case, Haiti now cannot say that they are to be paid reparations for it was they who offered the reparations.
I guess a follow-up question, Prof. Dupuy, to that, and maybe Chelsea, this goes back to what you raised, is, but wouldn't have the constitutional prohibition to foreign ownership of land in Haiti would have prohibited that happening in the first place? Like, no Frenchman would have been able to make a claim, right?
How do we know? How do we know that they wouldn't have if they had the titles to the properties and the Haitians respected private property ownership, and the former French planters, if they wanted to make a claim on those properties, how do we know that they wouldn't be able to do it? That was the preemptive strike that both Pétion and Boyer did to make sure that this issue would never be raised.
I think it's also interesting, and I know some work has been done on this, and I did very little archival research in Nantes at the Department Archive, and I recommend everyone do this because that's where, in fact, you find the claims.
Correct.
Indemnity, petitions. They're not in the Paris National Archives. This was done at the department level. And so, Prof. Dupuy, can you explain? Yeah, I know you're saying yes, yes. What you see in those archives, why they may be held at the department level as opposed to centralized, like through the Paris government. And I also found it interesting that some of those claims, even as you were stating that the indemnity seems to have been paid in the 1880s, I saw claims into the 1890s from people being submitted that they had a claim somehow from Saint-Domingue that they were, submitting to the department government of in that area of France. Can you talk about that a little bit, and what potential insight maybe the claims themselves might have about arguments whether or not Haiti's owed reparations, but even about what the indemnity may have meant to those, petitioning, and even to this question if French people could have or would have been able to make claims, or would they have done so had they been able to do so?
Well, it's hard for me to answer
I know I asked a lot, I'm
fully
sorry.
that question because the issue had to be done at the level of the state,
Mhm.
government to government. That is, Boyer was not dealing, Pétion or Boyer were not dealing with each and every former property French owners. They were dealing with the French government.
Mhm.
And if the former property owners were going to make a claim, they would first have to go through the French government to make the claim in Haiti.
Mm.
The offer of the indemnity by Pétion and Boyer was meant to settle that question, that they would no longer have any claims on those properties. And if
Mhm.
you look at it, I have no record, never read that there was any attempt by post 1825 that there was any attempt by any former French property owner to make claims on Haiti. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that, but I have never come across any indication that once the indemnity was settled, that the heirs of the former French planters were putting claims on the properties in Haiti.
Well, there are petitions, but what happened to those? I have no
I
idea.
don't know.
I think you'd have to follow up right
Yeah, I don't know.
after that claim. Felix, I have a question for you since you like provocative questions.
Mm.
So what if we take Prophet Dupuy's, I think also provocative claim that Haiti does not have a claim to reparation. I think in the sense that we understand reparations in this narrow vein. And I appreciate Chelsea's also understanding that we might also be more capacious in how we understand reparations, like archives and repatriating archival documents and objects, right, back to Haiti and other places from these metropolitan centers. And I think about, for example, Tendayi Achiume's article, Migration as Decolonization, in which she argues that colonial and neo-colonial relationships place, and she uses the terms first and third world, so I will use them. I don't normally use them, but she uses them in her article. But what they have essentially done over time has placed the first and third world as co-sovereigns. And so the right, therefore, of migrants from the global south to migrate, to move to the global north is a right that they have as co-sovereigns of people in the global north. And that liberal notions of just state sovereignty, and then also reforms through international law around refugee, asylum, human rights, really does not attack the fundamental assumption that there is no co-sovereign relationship between the first and third world, that colonialism has done this kind of work. This is not to say they're equal, but this is to say that this major historical event, colonialism and ongoing neo-colonialism, has reshaped things in the Westphalian idea of sovereignty in such a way that we are in this co-sovereign relationship. And it is that framework that gives then, again, people from the global south the right to move, because in fact, it's not that they're moving from their global south country to somewhere else. They're moving to the someplace else with which their country has had a long-term relationship that has impacted their own country's development, and their country's development has impacted the country where they're going to, their development as well, right? It's a very complicated, it's not a very complicated article, but I find it a very interesting argument or idea, right? And so is it time maybe to move beyond that question of reparation and what France owes Haiti, and maybe to think about how they are co-sovereigns, and that in fact, and think about the relationship in that way? What do you think even about that idea? Or is, and Prof. Dupuy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, part of what I pick up in your critique of reparations is that it has a particular, the call for reparations has a particular balance and value for political mobilization, say in the United States among certain groups and in Haiti among certain groups too. And do we hold on to it only for that symbolic reason or for the ways that it mobilizes some things, but we're not really getting anywhere on the reparations question? I mean, sometimes France has this, okay, yeah, we may be sorry, or maybe they don't even get to that point. The Southern Baptist Convention can apologize for slavery, but in terms of where the movement is, what is it achieving in moving states towards actually coming up with the funds? And I'm not saying, okay, then you pivot because you've lost that argument, but I'm just trying to figure out what's the investment, and is it maybe time to change to a new framework? And if that framework offers something that is real, we can really work with in productive ways, that it seems the reparations conversation has reached some dead ends.
Yeah, there's a lot in that question. So first I had wanted to say the archives in nuts are the archives diplomatiques, right? So this is why they're starred there, because they're diplomatic relations. And France has its archives spread throughout the country, for, I think social service reasons. But so the question of reparations is a complicated one, right? Because then it requires a monetary amount on injustice. And Claudine, who had asked a question originally about reparations, asked about what about justice? And I think to your point about sort of a relationship of sovereigns, I think that this is maybe part of what reparations can look like, right? To respect the sovereignty of the nation, to stop meddling in nations' affairs, right? And stop treating equals as juniors in relationships, right? I think on one basic level, this could be a site of, or a way of to repair, right? To get out of the way that how do you fix the mistakes of the past, right? I personally don't think, if the money went back to Haiti, like the earthquake money, it would mysteriously disappear into Panama bank accounts, right? I think that, right? So there needs, but because the world recognizes Haiti as the junior and allows these things to happen, right? That is not to say that I don't echo the call for reparations. I don't think it is not to say that there shouldn't be some monetary return to Haiti. Haiti has been indebted in this system of unequals continuing past 1915, 1948, the Governor's Island Accord, right? There is this new round of it. And so maybe, and only could exist because of this junior relationship, when the United States as a country is only maybe 20 years older than Haiti in its independence, And now I want to shift deflect the question to maybe Georges-Élie Lucien. Est-ce que vous parlez plus pour ça,
I'm asking the question to George and said, when people are asking for reparation in Haiti for slavery, the question of indemnity, can you please, what exactly were they asking? So how did the reparation would translate into? Can you please share with us, how does that translate? What does that translate into? No, we cannot hear you. Can you open your mic, please? Can you please repeat the question? I didn't really hear you. Excusez-moi pour créole là, oui. Son diaspora créole là, Jean-Loup. We were asking, in fact, people in Haiti, when they call for reparation or restitution, what exactly are they asking for? When they say reparation, how does that translate into the organization? What are they asking for? And And what would they do if they get if they finally get the reparation money? In the case of Haiti, there's a difference between restitution and reparation. Now, Haiti, I'm talking about internal organization or local organization. One organization is an Afro-descendant. The question about reparation restitution. In our specific case, it's a country that was they had stolen from the country. There were negotiations before, and Pétion had proposed an indemnity. But also, since there were but the ordinance did not take into account the initial meetings. The ordinance, the decision that the king had taken on the countries that he has control over. So the ordinance dismembered any initial arrangement. The ordinance said that they had taken over a country that struggled for its independence. And within the context of Haiti, like organization, the Collective Against the Ransom, its position, it's not looking just for monetary reparation. It was asking to reclaim the symbolism of 1804 and to reclaim the value of the 1804 or the different struggles that existed with regards to the ceremony of Bois-Caïman. There were different organizations that were dispersed that realized that they have to come together so that they can fight together. Now, with regards to the effort being made, the April 17, 2025, the French government made a statement. They said there were organizations like our organization, Collective Against the Ransom. It's the same practice. It's French spoke just like King 10, and Charleston did sign something, and the president did not sign anything. The population did not accept, and I gave you an excerpt from the song. And this is what happened with that happened and took place in 1843. So we are in the same situation. So the elite has the same attitude that they had in 1825. So the progressive movement were trying to struggle so that the population take over. There's an organization trying to have a local campaign movement so that the workers or the unemployed, what happened in 1825, for them to understand how it affected them. So the April 17 was not it's to understand the action that took place, to understand its significance. It's like France recognized its injustice toward us, but did not move any further. So an historian is there. Can you slow down, Lord? So France committed a ransom. So we asking so that the relationship to change the relationship, the dynamics, and also look at to see there's more solidarity among the organization, because if the French president spoke on this April 17th, it wouldn't happen if there was no effort. Oh, yes, please. We're asking for you to slow down, please. You're going extremely fast, but you're going a bit too fast. Can you please also wrap it up? I was gonna say that if the government, the French government, the president of France made a statement that did not take into account of what the claims are from the organizations, but he had to speak, to say something, because people were mobilized. And the commission is what he said, it's a way to put people to sleep. And our history, our relations, the commission that they put together, it's to shut us off. The commission was there, the metropole, or La France as a métropole, was the one making the decision. The committee that took place, they took shape based on how people in the colonies, they mobilized themselves. There were some paradoxical, there were the paradox between colonizers who, in their relationship with and then also old
qui vraiment yo même yo conditionné décision yo. Et c'est peut-être ça que si gain de bataille
and what we try to do is to change the dynamics.
Inverser rapport de force, c'est pas dans slogan, c'est dans
We're trying to see if we can change
And
the
this
dynamics.
struggle of power, this was to create the space that we create right now, where there could be some discussions or precisions and comments and people that are relatable. So this is what's going to allow to have other meetings, other exchanges, and other ways so that we can continue to fight for this issue. It's not just about restitution. The question is just to allow the mass can actually be appropriated, to understand what the history was, how it happened, how the fight was, and not only on the base of Haiti and the France. The fight is just about also there's a class struggle. There is a position of class that actually here within the question. So the mass has to understand when we talk about Haiti, we're saying that this is a society that has class. When we say 1825, this was a society that was divided in class at the time. So when we're talking about like in France, like you have the class, the working class that was actually fighting also, they didn't understand that. So in those different mass in the different countries, they can maybe kind of come closer to understand that this sort of struggle, this power struggle, so that now at that time, then we can question the restitution to France.
If I can just,
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had any last words, and
I
Chelsea.
fully agree with what George Eddie just said. It's a fundamental class issue that is playing out here. The indemnity was not for the population of Haiti as a whole. It was for the emerging ruling class of Haiti after independence that the indemnity was aimed at protecting. That's the point.
Thank you. Chelsea, do you want to have a few last words?
Sorry?
Oh, no, I was asking Chelsea if she wanted to have some last words.
Oh, no, I mean, I appreciate this discussion. I appreciate the sort of differing points of view. I certainly echo the call for reparations, for some form of payment. And I also want to echo just the desire to think sort of more broadly and more differently about what's possible, both historically and in the present moment. I think in this opportunity to think about 1825 and before and 2025, I want us to all sort of marshal all of the people who are coming together to talk and think about this, to try and move things forward.
Thank you. Thank you. April Mays, my fearless leader of the HSA, do you have any final words for us?
You're fearless. He only says that because I have access to curry goat. and occasionally once I can bring it to Irvine. Thank you so much, everyone who joined us in this webinar. As you can see, October's conference promises to be quite the dynamic conversation. And so we look forward to having you with us at the University of Pittsburgh. Also, as a reminder, I just put the link in the chat. Our Journal of Haitian Studies special issue publication launch this coming Monday at 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific, 5 to 7 Eastern. Please check your Haitian Studies, please check your email for an email from the Haitian Studies Association with information about that event. In the chat also, you will see a link to sign up to be on our mailing list. There were other questions, more questions in the Q&A regarding potential other options that Boyer or Petillon might have had, possible military action in influencing the decision. We will get to those. This whole conversation suggests to me that our organization in preparation for the conference might want to think about maybe an indemnity syllabus and access to a bibliography of resources, articles, books, so people know what the scholarship is out there. If anyone is teaching classes, include this question in your courses. This is a very exciting debating conversation that will engage your students. And as I always say, the 19th century, the most important century on the planet, says the 19th century historian, and history is so important. Thank you for all those who do the deep historical archival work that makes our knowledge possible. You are seen and you are valued, and I look forward to these conversations in October. Everyone take care. Have a wonderful weekend. Hope to see you on Monday back for our special launch of our Journal of Haitian Studies special issue.
Yeah,
Take care, everyone. Thank
you
you.
all for coming out. Soje nous padwe. And when this will be posted on YouTube, there will be a collection of books and articles with information on the indemnity for people to follow up on. Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank you.
weekend.